Alrighty, Azadi Bogolubov with Degrees of Freedom here, and I'm going to show you tonight how you would go ahead and create a very simple GraphQL entry using Node.js and Apollo server. If we go to our package JSON, this is really simple. We have one dependency, Apollo server. It is the current version as of right now from NPM. Here we see from lines 3 through 19 our type definitions. Here we have a type of weight with ID, name, sets, reps, and weight. We have the query, which references the weight as the type that it will take in. We have a mutation. The mutation means we're changing somehow, whether that be delete, add, modify, whatever. And it takes in the values from the original weight minus ID, since we don't know what the ID is going right in. And it will return back anything from the weight type. So we could easily hook this to a database. For the sake of a very simple app here, I've decided to use just an array, a native Java array. In here, we have two entries. They each fit the shape given from lines 21 through 36. On line 38, we start to discover our resolvers. Resolvers are how GraphQL knows what it's going to do with the system. I had started to put a delete entry in, but it turned out to be a massive pain because in GraphQL, the correct way of doing things semantically is to delete things one by one. In the prior REST API examples, I've been showing how to delete all. So for the sake of continuity, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel there. I'll leave that as an exercise for the user. And should you choose to take my upcoming course, we will go in depth on these concepts. For now, let's stick with the query, which would be similar to an HTTP GET in REST, and to the mutation, which would be similar to a post in REST. So on line 39, we see query. Weight goes to an empty function, no arguments, that points back to weights, which is this object. So when you query weight, you will get back the weights. When you mutate, the mutation of weight, there's two arguments here, the parent and the args. For our purposes, we're only going to worry about args. We're going to tell it to let the new ID equal the length of the array currently, which is 2, plus 1, 3. On a future iteration, be 4, 5, etc. Then we create a new weight object with the ID of the new weight, each of the arguments with the arguments from the past mutation. We push it back to the array. Once again, you could do the same thing with a database if you wanted to. You would just call the relevant database call to save it back to it, and then you return back new weight in its entirety. Now you might be thinking to yourself, how is this useful to me? Because how does it know, how do I know I want to have the entire weight come back? Well, the truth is you don't. And that's one of the beauties of GraphQL. If we keep going down here, we see now we've created the server with the type definitions and the resolvers. We've set up a simple server to listen, and it's ready to our current URL. It's running on 4000. By default, GraphQL gives us something called GraphQL. So if you were to go in and type in localhost 4000/GraphQL like this, it'll bring you to the sandbox. The sandbox then lets you put in your query, and it'll show you what you have available. You have the query, and you have the mutation. The query name is weight, and the mutation's name is weight in this case. So suppose we queried this query. Well, we see our two entries. We also see we have to put in everything. That doesn't seem like it has that much benefit over a REST API. But what if we didn't care about the sets, the weights, the reps? We just cared about the ID and the name. Well, we can get that information back. You might be asking me at this point, how's that help me out? If I have the data, I want it, right? Well, consider the case in which you might be working with a React app, and one graph is going to show you the names of the weights and the weight you did. In that case, it can be helpful to have name and weight, an ID, for one chart. But then what if you wanted to go ahead and just check your sets over time? Well, then you could have your name and your sets, or any possible combination thereof. So this prevents you from having to fetch the entire payload every single time over the wire, which may seem inconsequential at first, but in a production setting, you are going to care about that because extra bytes over the wire incur extra costs, extra overhead, and extra performance hits. So this, depending on your use case, could well be helpful. For the mutation now, if we go down here and we click, then it grays out our query and only does the mutation. For this, I'm going to go test node GraphQL. I'm going to put 5 sets, 5 reps, and 100 pounds because we got a bodybuilder here. And let's remove the name. Let's just return the ID. What we see here is we're sending in the payload and we're asking for the new ID back. Well, there we are. We have ID of 3. What if we were to go test node GraphQL 2, change this to 9 sets, and 12 reps, and 150 pounds. And suppose this time we want to go ahead and get the weight back. Now we get the ID and the weight. And we now see 4. Want the name, we put this entry in for GraphQL 3. Then we see that we get the name back. So we can return back just the information we want to give without giving too much, or we can return everything. And similarly, we can go over here to the mutation, and you can actually see what is available to be sent back. So you know what's available for you to use. So now, when we run this again, now we get everything back. And now, lastly, if we go to the query, we run it again, we now see all of our IDs as they've been stored into the system, a status of 200. If you were curious if we could do the same thing in Postman, the answer is yes. The way that an app is going to call it is going to be consistent no matter what. So if we go to localhost 4000, and we were to go ahead and do it, and these are always post semantics with GraphQL by convention, and we tell it now, do I have GraphQL inside of here? I don't know if I actually do. Maybe I don't have GraphQL in Postman. Well, there is a way to do it with Postman, I'm just not sure which, and so, but you are able to. So let's go here, GraphQL Postman. So yeah, it should be in there, but for some reason I guess my version is too old for that. So we're going to skip that today, but you can use the exact same query, the same way you do the raw JSON. Just go GraphQL, send your post the entry, put it through, and it will return back your response. Similarly, you can do this with tools like Swagger, and that's another really nice way to see your API in action. And this can separate based upon the environment you're working in. One more thing I want to say about the code is when you're doing this, you probably don't want to have your type defs inside the index file or your database logic or your resolvers. You'll probably want those in separate files. So you're separating your logic from your actual server code and then just calling them via imports. But for this very simple example, I wanted to keep it nice and simple and easy. So that's all we have for this. And as I said before, if you take my course that's coming soon, I will cover how to do deletions and show this in a larger scale sense of how to use it with React. Hope this was helpful. Thank you so much.